For thousands of years, there was one story that every sailor whispered in the dark. From the Vikings in the frozen north to the explorers of the ancient Mediterranean, they all saw the same thing. They described a monster, not a shark, not a squid, but a serpent, a massive, coiling beast that rose from the depths, long and slender, moving like a snake through the water. It was said to be large enough to crush a ship, and fast enough that you'd never see it coming. For centuries, science laughed at these stories. They called it mass hysteria. They called it mythology. They said the human mind was just playing tricks on lonely sailors. But they were wrong. The sea serpent wasn't a myth, it wasn't a dragon, and it certainly wasn't a dinosaur. The creature behind the legend was real. We found the bones, we found the teeth, and when we reconstructed the body, we realized something terrifying. The sea serpent was actually a mammal, a relative of the friendly whales you see today, except this one was built to kill everything it touched. Welcome to Primeval Life. Today, we are hunting the king lizard that wasn't a lizard at all. To find this monster, we have to go back to the early 19th century, deep in the American South, Louisiana and Alabama. Farmers plowing their fields started hitting something hard in the soil. They dug up massive vertebrae. These bones were so big they were used as furniture andirons and fireplaces. Nobody knew what they were. But in 1834, a naturalist named Richard Harlan got his hands on them. He looked at the massive, elongated spine. He looked at the teeth, which were jagged and serrated, nothing like a whale's teeth. Harlan was convinced this had to be a reptile, a gigantic prehistoric sea lizard. He named it Basilosaurus. In ancient Greek, that translates to king lizard. The name stuck. It sounded powerful. It sounded prehistoric. But there was just one problem, a massive problem. A few years later, the legendary Sir Richard Owen took a closer look. He saw something Harlan missed. The teeth. They had double roots. The rib cage, it wasn't reptilian. This wasn't a lizard. It wasn't a crocodile. And it certainly wasn't a dinosaur. The Basilosaurus was a whale. Now, when you think of a whale, you think of a thick, blubbery animal like an orca or a blue whale, a torpedo shape. Basilosaurus looked nothing like that. Evolution had done something strange. It took the standard whale blueprint and stretched it out like taffy. This creature grew up to 66 feet long. That is longer than a megalodon, longer than a T-Rex. Imagine a standard yellow school bus and then add another half bus behind it. That is the size of this thing. But it wasn't the size that was scary. It was the shape. It was incredibly thin. It didn't have the stiff back of modern whales. It moved by undulating its entire body up and down, slithering through the water column exactly like a giant eel. If you were a sailor standing on a deck and you saw 60 feet of coiling gray flesh rolling through the waves, breaking the surface in multiple humps, you wouldn't call it a whale. You would call it a sea serpent. And unlike modern whales, this animal didn't sing songs and it didn't eat plankton. Let's talk about the teeth. Modern baleen whales filter feed. Even orcas, the wolves of the sea, have conical teeth designed to grab and hold. Basilosaurus was built for violence. It had two types of teeth. In the front, it had sharp incisors to catch prey, but in the back, it had massive, triangular, shearing teeth. These weren't for holding. These were for chopping. We have found the skulls of other smaller whales, like the Durodon, with holes punched right through their skulls. Basilosaurus didn't just bite its prey, it crushed their skulls. Scientists have calculated its bite force. It wasn't just strong, it was the strongest bite force of any mammal to ever exist. It could snap bone like a twig. It lived in the warm, shallow seas of the Eocene epoch, about 40 million years ago, and it was the apex predator. Nothing was safe. It hunted sharks, it hunted large fish, and it cannibalized other whale species. It was a hyper-carnivore that looked like a snake and bit like a demon. But there's one feature of the Basilosaurus that makes it even more disturbing than a simple predator. If you swam underneath it, past the crushing jaws, past the 60 feet of slithering body, you would see something that shouldn't be there. Legs. Tiny, actual back legs. Basilosaurus is one of the few creatures that bridges the gap between land and sea. It still had vestigial hind limbs. They were too small to walk on, only the size of a human arm on a 60-foot body. For years, scientists thought they were useless, just leftovers from evolution. But recent theories suggest they were used for mating, or perhaps to latch on to prey during a death roll. Imagine that, a giant sea serpent that still has the shriveled legs of its land-dwelling ancestors dangling from its body. It's a biological nightmare. So how does this extinct Eocene whale explain the sea serpent myths of the Middle Ages? Because fossils don't just stay underground. One of the most famous places to find Basilosaurus is in Egypt, in a place called Wadi al-Hitan, the Valley of Whales. Today, it's a scorching desert, but 40 million years ago, it was a sea. As civilizations rose, in Egypt, in the Mediterranean, in Europe, erosion exposed these massive snake-like skeletons. Imagine being an ancient Greek or Roman traveler. You're walking through the desert or along a coastal cliff, and you see a 60-foot skeleton winding through the rock. It has teeth like a wolf and a body like a python. You don't know what a whale is. You don't know what evolution is. You look at that skeleton, and you know only one thing. That is a dragon. That is a serpent. And if the bones are here, the live ones must still be out there in the deep ocean. It is highly probable that the sea serpent sightings were a mix of misidentified animals, fueled by the terrified cultural memory of finding these real monsters in the rock. We spend so much time looking for cryptids. We want Bigfoot to be real. We want the Loch Ness Monster to be real. But the truth is, the reality of our planet's history is scarier than any ghost story. The sea serpent was real. It ruled the oceans for millions of years. It was a whale that moved like a snake and crushed skulls for sport. And thankfully for us, it's gone. What is the one prehistoric creature that you are genuinely glad is extinct? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this hunt, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. We are uncovering a new monster every week here on Primeval Life. I'll see you in the next one.